Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, and welcome to NFGeeks. Well, this video is an Ask Dr. Mike video every Sunday on the Facebook forum for NFGeeks. People post questions for me to answer in a response video, and whatever question gets the most likes wins. And this week's winner for this video is Jeff Miller. Okay, he's won many times now. He posts great questions, and his question is an interesting one because it relates to the Enneagram, and that's always a topic that people like to talk about when it comes to typology. So let me read his question. And so this is what he wrote. You've talked about your theories as to what Enneagram and Myers-Briggs types relate to each other. Can you talk about how Enneagram differences make a certain Myers-Briggs type appear different and vice versa? For instance, as a type 7 ENFP, how do you differ from a type 4 or a type 2 ENFP? And how do you differ from type 7s of Myers-Briggs types like me as an ESFP? All right, so this is a really important question for me to answer because it actually sort of knocked loose something in my head. And this is why I do these things. This is why I do the Ask Dr. Mike videos, because it makes me think of something else that I hadn't previously thought about, and something else comes out. And now sometimes, okay, the thing that comes out doesn't exactly answer the question, okay? It kind of, deviates from the question, and I think that's what kind of happened this time a little bit. I'll try to bring it around specifically to what Jeff asked, but there were two main things that came out. First was an analogy that suddenly came to me about, why is it that Enneagram and Myers-Briggs, sort of have this crossover, but they don't, but they do, but they don't, okay? And the analogy that I came up with, something from my childhood actually, which is that each theory, each paradigm is cutting the cake differently. And imagine that two different ways of cutting a cake are occurring at the same time, okay? And that is how we get things getting mixed up. So you're probably like, well, what the heck are you talking about? So this is what I mean, because this is what I thought of, okay? So let's imagine that personality is a cake. Okay, who doesn't like cake? So it's a cake. The model of Enneagram, okay, would be the standard way of cutting a cake, okay, which is wedges. Okay, so when you cut a cake, you cut it into usually 8 wedges. Okay, sometimes you cut it in wedges, as you go along. But if you're cutting the whole thing, you'll cut into 8 wedges, maybe more than that. But usually, 8 wedges, maybe 10. Okay, but wedges, specific wedges. Okay, that's usual. All right. Now imagine though if there was a different way to cut the cake, and I know that there was because my mother used to cut the cake in this way that in my childhood seemed bizarre and I didn't like it, although in my adulthood I kind of get what she was doing. So the way she would cut a cake is this. She would cut down the middle, okay, and that almost seems like, oh, this is going the same direction, but it so isn't. She would cut down the middle, and then starting at one end, she would cut like across that middle, and then across that middle, so it looked like somebody took a grill and just pushed it onto the cake, okay? Now, the reason why she did this is, and this is very ESFJ, she wanted everyone to get the same size slice. And she wanted everyone to sort of get the amount of slice that they wanted. Okay, so you could get, because you can't do that with a wedge. With a wedge, you get this big thing, and that's what you get. You get this big thing, unless you're cutting it in this crazy way. But if you cut it the way my mother said, you would get these even, almost bread-like, the size of bread, slices that you then could, pile on, and you could have 1 or 2 or whatever, and so it was a very efficient way of cutting the cake. Now as a child, I hated it, because as a child, you just want a big wedge and a giant mountain of ice cream and then frosting on that. You want this Everest of confection. You don't want to have these slices. But I get what she was doing. Okay, so now so I want you to kind of follow this analogy now. Imagine that doing the wedge thing is the Enneagram, and imagine that my mother's way of putting that grill like over the cake, the MBTI way. Okay, and you've done it at the same time. So imagine you do it at the same time. So there's slices that go across and there's slices and wedges. And if you think about it that way, you can see how one type of measurement crosses over into another. Okay, so a wedge is much bigger, so different things would go through that wedge, but they would still be separate stuff. And the same wedge would also, the same sort of bread-like piece would end up in another wedge, even though it's very similar. So that's what I think what's happening. The one is cutting the cake one way, and then the other is cutting the cake another way. And when you put the two together, you have crossover in weird ways because they're not cutting it the same way. Okay. That's the first one. Now that one we probably already know. But the real thing is the differing between different numbers and why. That's the thing that I'm really going to answer is why. Why is there these differences? So the way I kind of look at it between, I'll talk mostly just about myself because that's the easiest one for me to talk about. I definitely see 7 and 2 as ENFP. Other types may or may not be in 7 or 2, whatever. Just talking about ENFP. But I definitely can see ENFP in 7 and 2 very strongly. 4, not as much. There's sort of that INFP melancholy about love and, the rain and, I get into that a little bit, but really that's not my strongest thing at all. So, but I could see 2 though, 2 and 7. So, the one, I think the difference is that I think both are trying to, I don't want to say manipulate, but try to get a reaction from the other person to receive love and validation. They're both validating numbers. This is the way I see it. Okay. The 7 is a little more high energy and a little more macrocosmic, meaning it's a little bit larger. Okay. Larger meaning the crowd that's being, getting into contact with. The 2 is much more specific, much more microcosmic. It's about a person, okay? But I think the action is essentially the same action, okay? Trying to do something to get some kind of response back, in this reciprocal sort of energy of either it's esteem or love or anything like that, There's something that always feels, this is just sort of like within me. There's something about 2 that feels deep but kind of pathetic. Okay, 2 feels deep, but a little bit pathetic and low energy. There's something. This is just in my head. I'm not saying that's true the way 2 is described. I'm just saying this is how it hits me as an ENFP, being in that. 7 is high energy. Okay, and it takes a lot of sort of confidence because this is very 7 what I do here. It takes a lot of confidence and courage and gusto, but it's not as deep. I don't feel it's as deep sometimes. I try to make it deep the way I talk, but it's not as deep as 2. 2 seems deeper, okay? So that's how I feel it differs, between the 2. Now, the real big question, though, is why is that difference, okay? Why would there be difference, okay, between the 2? Because I definitely can see ENFP in both. So why is ENFP in both? And why would ENFP in one and not the other? And what is the difference going on? So the real difference I see is why there's differences. And finally, I think that the big answer, this is where environment comes in now. The big question with MBTI is always, nature nurture. And even though, the assumption, a priori assumption behind personality type is innateness, okay? And you could even argue maybe genetic, if you take it that far. Not that we know that, but, innate. We can say that. But there's still an argument about, well, maybe it's nurture. And I first thought it was nurture myself, and, I kind of switched over to innate. But where does nurture, take place? Nurture is what determines the variations between a type. The variations in a not between types, but in a type. The variation in a type is not innate. This is my great theory. The variation in the type is environmental. So the reason why one ENFP comes out one way and another ENFP comes out another has to do with environment, okay? And that is reflected in the Enneagram. And so that's what the Enneagram is actually, defining, in my opinion. But it's defining basically difference in environmental impact on innate personality types. Okay, that's what I think, and that's why you find multiple types in multiple numbers. Okay, because one type that's in one number was developed, from environment one way, and the other was developed and, was in an environment another way. Okay, so, and that's why, though, you can still see in both. But, so in other words, if I'm a 7, it's because I'm reacting to the environment in a certain way as an ENFP. If I'm a 2, I'm reacting to the environment as an ENFP in this other way, meaning it's a different environment. Okay. So that leads to the next part, which is that, okay, when I say environment, are we talking development, meaning environment that was raised in, very psychodynamic theory kind of stuff? Or are we talking about almost behaviorist and, regarding stimuli that it's entirely in the present, the environment in the present? Okay. Now, like a good ENFP, I'm kind of all over the place with that one. As somebody who was, who worked in mental health and has a lot of human condition, if I'll say it that, education and personal experience, and I teach psychology. I'm kind of more of a psychodynamic person in terms of family, and I always, talk about the importance of that. But I have to say, in light of the fact that I could easily see myself in 2, okay, easily see that, I think that it might be totally like behaviorist point of view, that it's just stimuli in the environment in the present. That given a different set of stimuli in the present now, I may far more be a 2. I may jump all the way into 2 and be totally a 2. So whether or not I'm a 7 or a 2 is environmental. Okay? Whether I'm an ENFP or not is not environmental. See, that's the difference. ENFP is innate. But what type ENFP I am is environmental. Again, it could be developmental. Childhood experiences leading up to the type of, the number that you're sort of in, or at least the number you usually end up in. I can see that being the case. But 2 is, being in 2 is an environmental situation, I would say, for me, the environment, Because here's why I say that. I find that in individual relationships, I'm more of a 2. I'm a lot less of a 7. I know I just said 2 is pathetic. Well, when I feel pathetic, I feel like I'm in 2, But, obviously when the relationships I have with YouTube and the Facebook forum, and you right now who's watching me, it's not a 2. This is a 7, okay? And 7 is dominant because I want to be a 7, and I'm reacting to 7, and I'm reacting to the internet and YouTube, and I love it. I love making these things. I could do this all day long, So that's very 7, But the innateness is ENFP, and because the type, so think of the type as the, the bottom, the seed, the foundation, and then whatever grows out of that's the Enneagram that's reacting to the environment. Okay, the innateness of the type is why, and this goes back to a video Nick and I did, that certain types can only be in certain numbers, and the reason for that is the innateness versus the environment. Okay, if you are an ENFP, you could, depending on the environment, you can be in different numbers, but there's only so many numbers you can be in based on the environment that has impacted you. Okay, because people talk about, well, maybe I'm a, maybe because of the environment I'm an ENFP that's really like an ENTP. I don't think that's the case. Okay, I don't think that's the case. I think you're an ENFP straight up, but you may be a 2, like that's a 1, 2-1, or like me, a 7-8. There might be an Enneagram thing that's gone on that has really sort of affected you and allowed for development to take place that puts you in a certain number. So, for example, even though it seems like if I was a 2, I'd be a 3, like a 2-3. I think when I'm a 2, I'm a 2-1. And as a 7, I'm not a 7-6, I'm a 7-8, okay, for sure. And you can tell what's lurking in that SJ environment, okay? Being in the SJ-ness is what bends the Enneagram, because that's what the Enneagram is measuring, what the environment is doing to the specific type. It doesn't change ENFP. I'm not I'm not an SJ. I mean, I know you get the ISTJ shadow stuff, but really, I'm very ENFP. That's very obvious. But when I'm moving around in the Enneagram, you can see that's SJ. I don't go to any of the other ways. On 2 or 7, or even 4. 4, I don't know that I'd be a 4-3. I could see myself as a 4-5, but 5 would be kind of, again, that SJ. But honestly, it really isn't SJ, and that's why I'm not in 4. That's environment. Now, that's developmental environment, of course. Connecting with me and shaping me, But that's the next question then to ask about all this is, you know, is the variations of a certain type measured by the Enneagram numbers, okay, a result of development in terms of the environment and development of childhood, or is in the present environment totally, and doesn't matter. Again, I'm a big believer in psychodynamic theory, but I'm wondering if it's totally, if it is in the present, the way the behaviorists talk about it in terms of stimuli. So, now the other question he asked to get that in is basically, how do I, what's the difference between, him and I, as both sevens, and we are both sevens. I mean, he has a YouTube channel too. I mean, we do very similar things. Jeff and I are more similar than you'd think, especially in light of all of this. Again, I would say the difference is, assuming that this idea I have is correct, it's the environment. Jeff and I are in similar environments. We either grew up in similar environments, or we are existing in similar environments, have grown to be in certain environments, or behavior has been reinforced by the environment. That might be the answer, actually, in the difference between the numbers and type. And so thus we're reacting to an environment that reinforces 7, for both of us. Okay, obviously there's some crossover with ESFP, ENFP, but not, it's very different, NF and SP. Even though I'm allegedly the SP of the NFs, and I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I'm still not an SP. But I would say that the 7 is measuring behavior that is being reinforced by the environment somehow for both of us, and our innateness, the ESFP and the ENFP, allows for that environment to, it allows for that kind of growth in that kind of environment, which is reinforcing that kind of growth. Okay, so that would be my answer for that. But it's all my full answer. It's all environment. And it's either environment that's affecting development, or it's environment that affects the now, stimuli in the now, like behaviorism says. And that's what the Enneagram numbers are measuring. Totally environmental differences variations within type. But the innateness is still in MBTI. Okay, so that's my answer. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, follow NFGeeks on Twitter and Tumblr, and come join the fun on the NFGeeks Facebook forum. I am offering typing services because I am a certified practitioner in MBTI and an educated professional. And you can be typed at the forum in 2 ways. One is that I'm doing I'm doing consultation sessions with individuals who are willing to pay, okay? And it's the cheapest price in town. Go check the internet for a consultation, okay, to get your MBTI type, $50. Okay, and it's using the real MBTI and all of that, so $50. Or if you're on the forum, I have a lottery once a week for somebody to get a free typing. Okay, MBTI typing, and so it's totally for free if you win the lottery, and that's every Monday night. So there's lots of ways to get typed by NFGeeks and get typed correctly, and that's kind of my goal, to do that. So feel free to do that, to engage in that. And if you're interested in typing services, feel free to email me at nfgeeks@gmail.com, and I will get back to you. All right, so that's all the information. Again, thank you for watching, and don't forget, NFGeeks, it's happening. All right, and it certainly is happening at NFGeeks.